when I've done portraits in the past following a traditional method, you go for lots of circles, so you start with an egg shape, okay? From there you find eye lines and stuff like that. But I've just thought, because I'm dealing with a lot of amateurs, I've just tried to figure out the best way or something that they find more tangible that they could do even if they've got no talent. Okay, so what we're going to do is essentially draw a robot. Yeah, most, or if not all, the brushes are flathead brushes. What's good about them is they're very direct, okay? Anything like a round head brush or a filbert where there's a slight curve, the tendency is you want to start using curves. Now I just find it's easier going from A to B, drawing a line. So also it's harder drawing a curve than it is doing a straight line. So the idea would be, so we're going to try and get this guy's portrait. Like I said, this is purely drawing. We're going to start off with a rectangular box like that, okay? Now what we want to do after this is we still want to some extent find a bit of an eye line. So if I estimate, and one of the important elements of this is you're not trying to find the perfect edge, or you're not trying to find an accurate eye to start with. You're finding, to some extent, the scaffolding that you're going to be building detail on, okay? So we'll find an eye line about there. Now within this eye line, what I want to do is I want to do two, to some extent, square boxes. So one like that, with a bit of a gap. I'll get out of the way in a minute. So they don't have to be perfect squares. What this will signify is that's where the eye sockets are. Okay. So rather than looking like when I was taught portraiture when I was younger, you had to find the eye. But what you're finding here is the eye socket. Okay. Now from that eye socket, what you can then do is do a couple of elongated rectangular shapes like so, and there for the ears, okay? Now, I haven't really looked at this guy's face, I'm just assuming he's normal in terms of the bone structure, so I only need to draw something like a robot. So where his nose is, I'm just going to look for a downward triangular shape, or actually no, it's the right way. Yeah, so a long triangular shape, and where the mouth is, I'm literally just doing something like that. Okay, he's got quite a long chin, so what I might do is just extend that down like so. That's really what you're looking at to start with. Okay, the important aspect of this, and something you'll find drawn to, is you'll want to start curving things. The one thing you're not allowed to do is add the curvature in it. And that's, to some extent, you're trying to create a habit of not doing curves, because curves are much more refined. So you're looking from A to B all the time in order for you to find shapes which you can then drop more of the functioning detail in that will make it look like, hopefully, this bloke. So to start with, do you just want to do that shape? Okay, so after this, what we want to do is we want to establish the eyes a little bit more, and we're going to shape the face, okay? The best way to start is to start on the outside, because it's less, if you make a mess, it's less obvious. So we're going to just draw a couple of lines, a couple of diagonals coming in like so. That's really to get the top shape, and to some extent where the jawline is, we can bring these lines in. Like I say, to some extent these lines just tell us not to go on the outside, but we can to some extent come in. So we can use, again, a couple of diagonals going downwards and across. And again, this is really just meant to be a little bit of a guide, just to start making it look a little bit more human. So something like that. It's like a photo fit. Now this is where you might start to initiate some of the kind of just measuring, if you like. So you could measure it with a brush, or just sight size, just examine it from distance. And I would imagine his bag comes down to about there. So potentially that box might be a bit high, so I could lower it if I wanted to. But instead of that, I'll just do a diagonal shooting upwards like so to represent that line of his bag under his eyes. And the same just on this side like that. Again, avoiding the need to add curves to it. So everything's very much a direct line from A to B. What you will essentially end up with at the end is a multitude of lines, but we're going to auto-correct that with maybe a bit of white if we want to. Okay, so once we've got those lines, so this is where it becomes a lot more concentrated, because to some extent you might want to get a little bit of a lightness. So like I say, I've just having put these lines in, I kind of think maybe this box should come down a little bit more, so I don't mind doing that. I can see his eyeballs, so I could use the side of this brush and really just drag a block in like so. This should look ridiculous to start with, like a cartoon character. So hopefully you've done that. Okay, so once the eyes go in, I will come around in a second. So a couple of little tricky diagonals. So where the top of the eyelids are, if I just run a line above the eyeball going up like so, and the same there, and then draw a line going down. So like I say, what I'm trying to do is avoid the outcome of feeling like I need to do a curvature with any of this. So very, very direct. Okay? And again, where the top of the eyebrows are, that looks like a faint diagonal going up, so I can just draw that across like so, and then down. And the same over here. Okay. So by now, to some extent, I've got a sense of the entire face and how things are relating to each other. Now, it might be that the chin's too long, it might be that the head's too small, or something like that. At this point in time, I kind of think, well, probably the chin's a bit too long. So actually, my initial mark was probably closer, and we'll just bring that in. And I can bring some of these lines in, like so. And again, where the ears are, rather than use a curve, I just might want to use a couple of little diagonals, just here and there. Okay, so the idea is you're trying to create a structure where, at the very least, it looks human. The features, to some extent, are relatable. Now, obviously, what you could work on, to some extent, are the minutiae of measurements. But the idea of this is to establish, actually, just the idea of a portrait. So from here, what we could do is start to add shade, or we could add a few more bits of line work. So, for example, I know it's dark on this side. He's an old guy. Maybe I could distress his face by putting a few lines in. Again, what I'm trying to do is avoid the outcome of doing anything circular, certainly at this stage. So either some blocks of shade going in. It's dark on this side. I could darken this area if I want to. A couple of shades, like so. Also, I've got a slightly larger brush. It's slightly more convenient. And I can just shade off this side of the face, like so. And the idea, as soon as you put the tonal aspect of it, where you start to shade it in, it's going to take on something slightly more three-dimensional. And the purpose of this is, when you normally learn to draw, you normally do an outline, an accurate outline to start with. But what you're trying to do with this is you're trying to get a basic structure that actually the last thing you do is to try to start then to get the accuracy of it. Okay, so like I say, you're really looking to the best way I can think of explaining it, and I think sculpture plays a big part in the way I paint. If you think of a slab of rock or clay that you're pounding into something that looks like a slightly more accurate version of what you're trying to portray. So like I say, the idea fundamentally is to create something where you've got the basics of it. Towards the end, you are allowed some curves. Okay? And like I say, it plays a more important part, actually, the idea of this stage. One of the problems as you get older is logic overtakes creativity. So you're trying to avoid looking at this guy's face as something tangible and logical. And the reason for that is there's all these curves. Curves are harder. Trying to nail the perfect edge of the side of his forehead is going to be fairly difficult. So if you can break it down to some extent into something a lot more basic and a lot more abstract, you can then, like I say, start to add some curves just here and there, and all of a sudden it's going to look a little bit more lifelike or a bit more realistic. So at the end, you are allowed to then correct some of the edging, add a bit more curve to it. If you want to use some white to put in some highlights here and there, you can do. But essentially, the idea of painting a robot to start with will give you the essence of a portrait, and then you can build on that after. Okay? Just so I wander around, see what.